Thank you, Les Cancorla, and also my good wishes to the Cancorla. Taoiseach, like many in this House, I've had so many emails, I've had calls from principals, from parents, students, teachers, all extremely concerned about the issue of substitution for teachers who are sick or self-isolating due to COVID. Now, it's really important to say, Taoiseach, this is not a new or unexpected problem. I mean, COVID, yes, has exacerbated it, but it's still an issue. I mean, I raised this several times with the Minister for Education last year, and she kept telling me about the supply panels, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But recently, the INTO have done a survey in November which showed the extent of this problem, but in many ways we were ahead of them in Sligo, because there was a number of surveys done in September and October in 32 schools where there were 473 absences that required substitution. 22 schools, 69% had access to supply panels. That panel, for those 22 schools, supplied 15% of the substitutes. 27% of cases were covered either by special education teachers, principals, or simply were not covered. Of the remaining 10 schools that did not have access to supply panels, there was no substitute available 34% of the time. That's one in every 3 days. So, and that's mainly the smaller schools, Taoiseach, where they don't have the flexibility within the school to juggle teachers. There were many comments made by teachers about this and principals. I don't have time to read them, but basically what they're saying is that they make 15, 20, 25 calls and they can't get substitutes. This is crisis. It's worse now than it was before. I mean, today we hear that the Minister is meeting reps from the teacher education colleges, but Taoiseach, this should have happened this time last year. This is bad management, and I hate to say that, but I think it needs to be called out for what it is. When we're in a crisis, then we have to take unprecedented actions. And you've done this in other areas, so I don't know why it hasn't been done in education. Yes, many of the fourth-year students in teacher training colleges are already substituting. So where do we look? Do we look to retired teachers? Do we look to teachers on secondment? Do we look to those in the inspectorate for a short period of time to get us over this hump? It's not ideal. Nothing is ideal in a pandemic, and anybody who says it is not reasonable. But we do expect proper planning to deal with this ongoing and escalating problem. And I would ask Taoiseach, what are we going to do?
First of all, I would agree with the Deputy that given the once-in-a-century nature of a global pandemic, that we do need to take measures now in respect of teacher substitution, which you would not take in ordinary peacetime, put it that way to you. But that doesn't mean that the stakeholders, all stakeholders, be they regulatory, be they unions, have to show some degree of flexibility as well. Today's meeting with the higher education institutions is not the first engagement between the Minister and the institutions. There have been challenges in terms of working out or attending for the theory side of it and so on. In my view, flexibility has to be shown in relation to student teachers. I think they could go a long way to helping. I think in addition to that, I think we have to look at areas like the retirement has been looked at, and there's been good constructive flexibility shown there by the Minister for Public Expenditure in terms of facilitating additionality there. In terms of, again, there's other areas that the Minister is exploring with the other partners, where I believe that a bit of flexibility on all sides to get us through this particular period should be shown in respect of the substitute teachers. The Minister has already provided significant additional resources in terms of the 400 teachers that were allocated to supply panels where the department had identified areas of greatest need. I mean, the supply panels now employ 480 teachers. They provide substitute cover to almost 2,600 primary schools across the country, and they work alongside the more traditional existing methods of sourcing substitute teachers, such as the National Substitution Portal Service, Subseeker, operated by the Irish Primary Principals Network and developed under the Department's Teacher Supply Action. But there is no doubt that, and again, in any 1 month or in any 1 year, there can be a whole variety of reasons as to why substitute teaching is required to replace existing teachers. But notwithstanding that, given the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic, I think we have to show, and I think all the stakeholders involved, in my view, would have to show flexibility in respect of the utilisation of student teachers, and indeed other alternative methods of providing teachers. I mean, we have many qualified people who may not, for example, necessarily have the teaching qualification per se, but would have degrees and so on. Who be, these are issues we need to look at. And I think if, given the circumstances, given the fact that the vaccination campaign has been very strong, the booster is rolling out, I think if everybody put their heads together, we could get a resolution of this. I certainly alleviate the situation.
You said yourself it's a once-in-a-century happening, and you said all stakeholders have to show flexibility. So I'm asking you, has there been inflexibility? And if so, how do you believe we can get over this issue? I mean, I agree the Minister has given resources, but the truth is they're not enough, because it's a once-in-a-century happening. You said it yourself. So therefore, in a situation like this, we have to make sure that the resources we put in place will support the systems like education, which you and all your colleagues believe are one of the most important systems to support. All I can tell you, Taoiseach, is you spoke of supply panels. 1/3 of schools in Sligo do not even have access to supply panels, never mind able to get teachers from them. So this is a once-in-a-century emergency situation, and I believe that not sufficient planning has gone in to deal with it.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, could I wrap up by saying asking our very best wishes to the Count Corla, and to wish him the very best in his recovery from COVID-19. I do believe in flexibility at moments like this. And this is not related, but I'll give you point to point. I remember many years ago when I was Minister for Education, the idea of introducing a qualified Montessori teacher to primary school was something that was anathema to all and sundry who were in primary education. So there can sometimes be too rigid bureaucratic approach to what we should do in the middle of a pandemic like this. That's my point, and I'm sure the stakeholders will work with the Minister to resolve this. Because the Minister has gone a long way in terms of providing the resources. It's not a funding resource issue. I think the student teachers does offer an opportunity. I think deputies articulated this last week, Deputy Crowe in particular. There's other issues around the 22 hours, for example, and mechanisms there. But all of that does need working through with the Teaching Council and with the unions, and there's all different permutations to this.
Thank you.